guess what? I'm switching to Canon!
Alright, speaking of the R5, I have a confession to make about my R5.
And this is the one I've had for a few months, so there were some quirks and things to it that I think will be ironed out when the launch version comes, and there was also a couple things that I was unsure of. Example, if you're shooting a lot of 4K 120, sometimes the camera starts to overheat, and it gives you that overheat warning, just so that the things inside don't melt and it doesn't get destroyed.
It's true, after Armando and I spent days testing the Canon R5 with the A7S III side to side, back to back, I've gone ahead and canceled my pre-order on the Canon R5. And yep, you guessed it, I ordered the A7S III.
Oh my gosh, it's overheating. There's a record limit in 8K.
So I filmed the first day in 4K and then some 4K 120 B-roll stuff. And then I tried to edit and I was like, this isn't gonna work. There's no way that I can make like daily or semi-daily vlogs with the 4K footage from this, not even the 8K, the 4K footage from this R5.
What are people, if you're a photographer, if you're a videographer, should you switch? There's all these questions that people have as they go into these buying decisions.
Some simple stuff, I suppose, like if you're like some clear messages. I mean, if you're into video, like if video is your main squeeze, then the A7S III is the best offering available to you. End of story.
Thank you all for joining me today. I need to make sure that the sound is working. If anybody has any audio issues, please let me know. I really appreciate it. But again, thanks for joining in to today's live. And today I just want to have a discussion. As you guys can see from the intro, I took some clips from some very, very popular YouTube channels where they had some words and things to say about the Canon EOS R5. Not the RC so much. I actually own both at one point. Very recently, I sold my Canon R5, and then last week, so like literally maybe 10 days after I sold my R5, Canon releases a new firmware update that effectively solved my gripe with the R5, which is the overheating. So I thought I would make a video because something has changed with Canon. And I've been critical of Canon. If you guys follow the channel, you guys know that I've given them a hard time and I've given them a lot of praise over the years. But something absolutely has changed in that it's making them want to hang on to their market share. And you know, in other live streams, I've alluded to why so many people on YouTube choose Sony over Canon. And I realized that Canon has a lot of different divisions. You know, they primarily make money off of selling lenses versus camera bodies and so on. So I've been very critical about Canon, but all of a sudden, Canon now cares about their bodies. And I think it has to do with market share for sure, but also the new transition into these RF lenses. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters to people like you and I, right? We use these tools to make money. And the R5, when it launched, having the ability to shoot 8K, that was very close to the capabilities of, say, a Red 8K camera. And I'm not talking about Monstro because it was nowhere near Monstro, but Helium for sure, better than Gemini, absolutely. Dragon, you know, I mean, I'm a Red fan, right? You guys know this. I own multiple Red cameras. So for me to admit that the R5 8K was that good after I've spent a lot of money on red cameras is not super easy, because it's always easier to just kind of surround yourself with people that think exactly the way that you want to, or that are saying the things that you want to hear to justify why it is that you're making the decisions that you're making. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that is like way more interested in what's going to make life easier for my crews, life easier on set, move faster, deliver more projects, edit faster, and so on and so forth. And that's something that Canon has always managed to accomplish somehow, some way, from back in the 5D Mark II days. They know how to give us what we need and what we want to be able to be successful. They're a company that is interested in making profit, right? Just like all of us who are running production houses, we're interested in making profit. So whatever it is that has happened, whether it be Sony handing out free gear to all these different popular YouTubers and influencers and so on, supporting them, making sure that they're treated the way that they want to be treated so that they can talk in abundance about the Sony brand and so on and so forth. Whatever Sony has done, it's now finally pushed Canon to say, this is how we wanted to segment the market. And we're okay with sacrificing what we want and giving people what they want, especially people who have supported us over the years. And I think that that's really, really important. And I don't know this to be a fact, right? Canon doesn't talk to me. As you guys know, and if you guys saw the last live stream, I've effectively burned every bridge with a brand that would sponsor content on my YouTube channel at this point. I have a select few that I'm still working with, and there are reasons behind it, and money is not the reason. Canon is not one of those brands. I use Canon gear. There is no love loss on my end, because if Canon produces the right tool for me to get my job done, for my crews to get their job done, for me to have more people out in the field creating content and making money for the company, then we're going to choose that tool. It's that simple. So that's complete transparency. So going back to this R5 versus the R5C. Two cameras that apparently are very similar in a lot of ways. It really feels, when you look at the two side by side, like they just decided to add a fan on the R5C, put a red C badge on it for cinema, and then that's what they called it. But they are two very, very different cameras. So I'm going to start by sharing my Canon R5 story. So I was one of the first people to jump on board with Canon mirrorless. I got the Canon EOS R, and then when the R5 came out, I didn't even hesitate. I pre-ordered it, bought it. I've traveled across the world with the R5. I went to Australia, I went to South Africa, I've been all over the United States. I went to Japan, all on paid projects, using that camera for stills and for video, commercial projects, corporate clients, you name it. I've shot tens of thousands of stills on it, and I've shot hundreds of hours of video. There were and have been a few times when on a project, the R5 did give me the overheat warning, other than a live stream where I went more than an hour live streaming. I think it was like 57 minutes or so, where I was using the R5. It wasn't recording. It was just basically showing me this talking head version on a live stream. I got long-winded, as you guys who follow the channel already know I can get long-winded. And after, almost 50-ish minutes, the camera decided to shut off because it overheated. That is the only time ever on any kind of project, whether it be a corporate client, some B-roll shots that I was doing for a commercial shoot, a national commercial shoot, or anything else where the camera actually overheated on me. There were times when I was on set and I was working and I got the overheat warning and I would shut it off and it would, reset itself, and eventually the overheat warning would come back on and so on. But I never had it actually shut down on me other than that one time on a live stream. And it was embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing to know that that can happen. And if you're on a paid project, that's something that you can't do. With this new firmware that they released, they aren't telling you. They're saying you may. I think that's the words that they used in the actual firmware release or the notes for the firmware release. They say you may be able to get longer record times. I think that that's really cool. They're also saying that the bottom of the camera is going to get really, really warm or hot even. That's also good to know. What they didn't say is that they removed the 30-minute limit, which really means to me that the R5 is better than it ever has been because of this firmware release. But also it can't be used for a live streaming scenario because the live streaming events that we cover are never less than 1 hour, where the camera needs to continuously be running for an hour. In most cases, it's 90 minutes, and in some cases, it's all the way up to 120 minutes. So if it isn't able to do that, then it sort of removes itself from those scenarios, but it makes itself now completely available for scenarios like corporate, right? Anything corporate, B-roll of any type, gimbal work of any type, drone work of just about any type. And what makes the R5, in my opinion, I'm not even going to say better, but I'm going to say the reasons why I now regret selling my R5 after this firmware release is that it is in fact using the more modern autofocus algorithm instead of what we have on the R5C. Now, autofocus is one of those really weird things for me because I'm getting used to trusting autofocus. And it isn't something that I've done personally. Some people on my crew swear by it. Johnny loves autofocus. I'm older, so I'm old school, and I like being able to tell a story by how you pull focus, right? Because pulling focus allows you to change the focus plane based on whatever the script says. And to me, that is part of the storytelling process. Autofocus, you lose that control and you allow the camera to make those decisions for you. But in the corporate world, in content creation world, who's keeping track? Let's be honest. The name of the game is volume versus art. And I'm not saying there is no talent to creating content. There is talent. Hopefully there is an objective to whatever storyline you're trying to tell and so on and so forth. But the R5 or a camera like the R5 or the R5C or the Sony's, for example, are able to, or they facilitate the ability to create content much, much faster with zero to no crew, as in by yourself. And I think that that's where these cameras really fit in really well. So If I had to do it all over again, I would have kept my R5 and had the ability to jump between the R5 and the R5C based on whatever scenario I was doing. Because the R5C, and make no mistake about this, it is more expensive. I know this, so there is never a true apples to apples comparison. But the R5C, in my opinion, is 10 times a better camera than the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro for live productions. I personally ran and operated an R5C for 4 days straight, 10 plus hour days, live streaming, one room, one scenario, and it never gave me an issue. That's not something I could say about the R5, but the R5, on the flip side, helped me shoot national commercials, international commercials, brand commercials all over the world. Yeah. South Africa, Australia, Japan, Canada, all over the US. It never was a problem for me. I want to address a couple things, and I realized that the clips that I played were all clips from, when things happen, right? I was one of the ones that was not really super thrilled about some of the changes to the R5 and so on. Overheating, again, as I mentioned, other than the live stream time, for me, it never happened. But when Maddie talks about, in that clip that I played at the beginning, when Maddie talks about how difficult it would be to edit 4K from the R5 with the machine, that whatever machine he's using, which he didn't actually say in that clip. This intro that you guys saw with the Strangers Things type of titles with my name on it and then my picture on top. So that came from the nostalgia pack that Maddie is selling. And if you guys are interested in it, I'll be sure to include a link in the notes so you guys can support Maddie. I think it's awesome that he likes the whole retro thing, and he and whoever he partnered with put that whole thing together. But the reason why my picture is all jumpy and kind of scattery is because on my maxed out Apple Studio computer in Premiere, I cannot see the animation in a way that allows me to keyframe anything else that I want to add to the animation. It stutters and it lags, and it is 15 seconds of animation that took almost 15 minutes to render. Not quite. It was probably closer to 13 and a half minutes, but it felt really, really, really long. And again, in the timeline, I can't even see the animation happen. Even if I move my playhead from, say, 1 second to 2 seconds to 3 seconds to 4 seconds, one at a time, and waiting, it takes a very long time for the animation to update. So be warned, if you buy those presets from Maddie, and I think he said it when he launched that new product on his YouTube channel, they are heavy, and they are taxing on a lot of systems. Because I'm talking about computers, I'm going to also then say, because I've been praising my Mac Studio quite a bit, my Mac Studio is fire, no doubt. But it is not my Mac Pro. My Mac Pro could handle sustained loads better than my Mac Studio. So if you guys are interested in seeing what I'm talking about in that video, or what I'm talking about specifically, I'll make a video since I took my Mac Pro and turned that into my home computer. But yeah, so that's that. Then as far as the Canon Cripple Hammer, I think the only thing we have to overcome at this point, if I'm not mistaken, is that 30-minute record limit. If Canon removes that 30-minute record limit from all of their cameras, I don't know that there's anything people are going to be able to complain about. And I'll take it one step further. I have friends, just like I'm sure you all have friends, that are shooting on a lot of different cameras. Maybe cameras that are not what you're using. Some of them might be Sony. And no matter what, I'm going to go on a limb here, and maybe I'll exaggerate a tiny bit, but 8 out of 10 people that are shooting on Sony cameras still complain about Sony colors versus Canon colors. Of course, these people would have had to come from Canon cameras and not be one of the Sony ambassadors or sponsored people. And that's just the fact. Canon really does find a way to make it easier for us to get our job done. But what we all need to understand, me included, is that the reason why they give us these tools is so that we can continue to buy more of their lenses. Because now that I have my workflow locked in for the R5C, for example, I know I want to replace all my EF lenses with RF lenses. And guess who makes all the worthwhile buying RF lenses? Canon. But let's do a quick comparison, because that is what my thumbnail said. R5 versus R5C. R5, what are the upsides? IBIS. If you take macro shots, if you do macro photography, the R5 is going to be a better camera. It just is. What else? I'm joking. Battery life, of course. Battery life on the R5 it's phenomenal. It's exactly what you would expect from a Canon camera. IBIS, autofocus, all the autofocus features of the R5. The ability that the R5 can switch from shooting in CLog 3 versus CLog, so both versions with view assist, both versions. I think that that's also significantly better than the R5C. And the fact that you don't have to rig it up. If you're going to mount it on a drone, which, by the way, this is a wind down weekend, so cheers to all of you. You could rig it on a gimbal, you could rig it on a drone, you could rig it on a rover, you could rig it on a car mount of some sort. The R5C with IBIS is going to give you better performance than what you can get with digital IS only when you're not shooting in RAW on the R5C. So from a still side, I think the R5 and the R5C are very close to being a wash. But on the video side, for anything that requires additional stabilization, or if you don't want to shoot in CLog 3, the R5 is likely a better camera. Now, going back the other direction on the R5C, for me, which ultimately is what I chose, right? I chose the R5C over the R5. IBIS is important, but again, because I'm older and I'm old school-ish type, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so you all can figure out how old I am. The R5C, not having IBIS, it's something that I didn't have before the R5, so I guess I never cared about it. When I did own the GH4, which has IBIS or some sort of stabilization, that camera was not the right camera for me. So I didn't keep it very long. So IBIS was not something super important to me. Being locked into shooting CLog 3 on the R5C is both a blessing and a curse for me. A blessing in that it truly does give me a good representation of what my final image will look like with view assist. And it's a curse because prior to the R5C, I never, ever shot or processed my clips in CLog 3. I always used CLog 2. And before there was such a thing as CLog 2, I used the original CLog. So I never did the CLog 3 YDR thing. I've never done that. That's just never been my workflow. And I realize that that is good for a lot of people. I'm still the type of guy that processes raw in Resolve. So even though I'm exposing for CLog 3, when I bring my clips, my raw clips into Resolve, I process them as CLog 2 because I can get more dynamic range, and because I expose the way I wanted to expose, I don't have to worry about things like extra noise or blowing out highlights. I pay attention to those types of things. So that's those are a couple things. I see Cameron is in the chat. Thanks for joining, dude. Cameron's got multiple videos where he's doing comparisons, shooting between the two cameras. You guys should check it out. If you didn't already, visit his channel. And I'll make sure that after this live stream, I'll link it down there because I've enjoyed those videos. And shit, it's true. Like, if you are doing more than 50% video, R5C is a better camera than the R5. It just is. But if you need another body and you can't afford two R5Cs, the R5 now has turned into a really, really appealing option. An option that allows the colors to almost line up perfectly, which is something that Canon has never done across any of their cameras, right? If you own the R or the R5, the colors in CLog, they don't match. If you own the R5 compared to the C200, in CLog, the colors don't match. And that's true across their entire line. But now with the R5 and the R5C, that gap, that difference is almost non-existent. So I think this is the closest we've ever been, ever been, to having different tier of cameras from Canon allow us to seamlessly integrate them into our workflow. I think that is phenomenal. And it's really good on Canon side. I really do. So thank you, Canon. Thanks for starting to listen to us. And sorry that it took you so long to make all these YouTubers and influencers decide to jump ship. And I realize you're not going to give them free cameras. But if you would have maybe thrown us a bone once in a while, maybe you wouldn't be in the situation you are in now, trying to scramble to figure out how to stop the exodus. But I'm going to tell you, again, for me personally, the tools that make my life easier are still on the Canon side versus Sony side. And I am biased because of the amount of lenses and the investment in lenses that I've made over the years. They are Canon mount lenses, which makes it very difficult for me to move to Sony. But if I look at a Sony image, and I'm going to use the Alpha 1 as an example. If I take a look at a Alpha 1 8K file on my Pro XDR display, so it's a 6K display, it's not even 8K, right? And I look at an 8K file from the R5C, or the R5 for that matter, the Sony image looks plasticky. It looks artificial, it looks exaggerated, and it looks over-sharpened. The Canon image looks like they over-sharpened it a little bit. But fortunately, you can dial that down enough to remove that artificial look, but it never looks plasticky. And what I mean by plasticky is the difference between, say, imagine your white point and then your middle gray point and then your black point. The areas between middle gray and black, this gradient value and the gradient value between middle gray and absolute white, or the clipping point, this gradient value on Sony cameras, it practically doesn't exist. They're hard steps. You physically can see them, which makes it very difficult for them to allow something like skin tonality and texture to show the gradients and the depth in color. Now, if you're a product, photographer, cinematographer, content creator, and so on and so forth, that shit doesn't matter. But if you ever need to put or point a camera at a person, that begins to matter a whole lot. So I guess all that to say is only you can really tell which camera or which system is going to be right for that situation. Because if I'm shooting real estate, honestly, do I care about all that gradient information between middle gray and the highlights? Nope. As long as my highlights look pleasing when they clip, I'm not really all that interested in what happens in between. But if you're doing a lot of interviews or a lot of talking head of any kind, or instructional videos where there is an individual, a human who is alive, right, in front of a camera, then all of a sudden that matters, because the tonality changes in skin in the way that our eyes perceive them flat out disappear when you're looking at them on a Sony. And I don't want to bash on Sony, because Sony does a lot of things right. And like I said at the beginning of the video, they've now pushed Canon to give us the tools that we want. And I realize that it's double serving Canon, right? They give us the tools that then allow us to keep the tools so we can continue to buy their products. I get it. But in the end, we win because we're able to continue to work in workflows and scenarios that allow us to make money. That's really kind of what I had. I will say that the R5C is superior to the R5 in a lot of other ways, right? 4K 60, 8K 60, which we can only get out of Raptor at this point. And Raptor is a $25,000 camera for the body or brain only. That's Red Raptor, for those of you that aren't familiar. So 8K 60, 25,000 versus R5C. I mean, that's kind of hard to beat, just being honest. And if our delivery platform is not visual effects or major motion pictures, save the money. Am I going to save the money? Probably not. I'm just being honest, right? But will I get rid of my R5C? My R5C effectively is transitioning into being our daily corporate workhorse. That is what the camera is thriving at, and it makes it super easy to buy in on that workflow. Other areas that it's better. So we talked about dynamic range, way better, right? We talked about workflow because of how it basically oversamples everything from the 8K sensor. That is going to instantly give you a better picture. Dual native ISO is very, very good, but what makes dual native ISO even better is the ability to do black shading or black balancing. That auto black balance ABB that you guys see in the tools menu, that allows you to map out a black point on the camera to give you the cleanest dark areas and shadows off of whatever it is that you're going to be shooting. We've only ever seen that in true cinema cameras before. So we see that with Red, we see that with the C500 Mark II, we see that with the C300, C200, and so on. We now have it in this form factor. That by itself is going to make your dark areas, your moody images, that much cleaner and save you time in post-production. And that's even true if you're shooting in RAW, right? Obviously, there's image processing if you're shooting in anything that is not RAW, because the camera is then processing the image. But if you are shooting in RAW, it still will give you a cleaner image. And I think that that's really, really awesome. For me, here are my top reasons why the R5C is better than the R5. And it doesn't take away from the fact that I still regret selling my R5 after this firmware update, okay? Which really means I would keep both, because both have a place in production, in today's modern production. For me, false color, very difficult to live without, something I can only get with the R5C. Time code, very, very, very difficult to live without at this point for me, especially after shooting on Komodo almost exclusively for over a year, or multiple Komodos for that matter. Very, very difficult to get rid of that for me now, especially anything having to do multicam. It's just hard. Or if I can't have a sound mixer on set with me, having 32-bit float recording is key, and I can only do that if I am using timecode. So again, one of those things where the pandemic forced us all to sort of reinvent who we do, what we do, and how we do it. These are two things now that are critical to me. Auto black balance coupled with dual native ISO, it makes my light kit smaller. It shrinks my light kit. That is another huge, huge thing. Proxy recording, very difficult to say that that's not a gigantic plus for me. And the ability for me to use that small of a camera in any scenario, whether it be live stream, corporate, commercial shoot, on a drone, on a rover, on a gimbal, on a Steadicam, on a tripod, all of a sudden, this is my Swiss Army knife. And I don't have to worry about autofocus. And it has eye autofocus. And it has face-only autofocus, which is something that the competitors don't have. And yes, the R5 has it. A lot of different things that make that camera really, really appealing. A bonus thing, which is not cheap, it's actually kind of on the expensive side if you ask me, is the Smart Shoe XLR adapter for the R5 by Tascam. I wish that thing was 32-bit float so that I could trust it without having to concern myself about the sound levels. I also wish that that Smart Shoe adapter allowed me to have 4 channels of audio, not just 2. It doesn't. But it's better than what I had before, because now I can actually use a shotgun mic with phantom power and a lavalier, as well as my timecode system, where if I need more than 2 channels, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on channels can be all recorded on the Tentacle Sync E, which is using timecode in 32-bit float, allowing me to keep my timeline well organized independent of trying to sync up audio in post-production, no matter how many channels, whether I need 3 channels or I need 30 channels. That is really, really powerful. So I've ranted for a bit. I hope that you guys understand that I think both cameras are really great. I still, if I could only keep one, R5C is still going to be my choice. The R5, I do regret it because I think it now has a solid place for years to come into production. So I'm going to look at the comments, and I know that I'm way, way, way behind on comments. But Lovable Natalie, thanks for stopping in. Really appreciate it. Let's see. James, good to see you. James is in Korea. Let's see. Stuart, thanks for stopping by from Europe. Always good to see you, Kevin. You are awesome. I don't know who the artist is, but I will make sure that I get that to you. And I don't know how to pronounce your name. Otherwise, I would tell you what I would say your name. So sorry. Let's see. Lewis, always good to see you, man. Thank you. PB Films. How you doing? Okay, let's see here. I'm thinking of selling my R5C and buying down to the R5. Make no mistake, R5C is much better camera in my opinion. I would say if you're never planning on doing a live event or working a live event with that camera, then you're probably in good shape. If you're planning on doing anything having to do with long takes, maybe it's not the time to sell it. I'm not sure that I would. I personally would, if I had to do it again, I would have kept it. I love the R5C, but the gimbal operator, because the autofocus is much better than the R5. So I don't disagree with you, Theodore. So yeah, I mean, the fact is that that's now a very, very difficult choice. And for someone who is not in any system, not in a Canon system, not in a Sony system, now Canon just became so much more interesting and so much more appealing than it ever has been. R5C autofocus override is head priority detection. I can stay focused on my subject. So yeah, you could turn face only off. You definitely can. You could also turn on tracking and then choose what you want to track. R5C is better for everything else. R5C is better for just about everything in most cases. Yeah, I would keep both if I had my choice. I like my R6, smaller file sizes, looks great, 1080 all day. So that's actually another good point, right? So the majority of social media and streaming platforms, as well as many broadcast platforms still today, 1080 is what they're doing, or 720 even. If it's going to be broadcast via satellite or cable, more than likely it's 720. If it's over-the-air broadcast, it's probably 1080. And if it's streaming, it's 1080 unless it's something like Netflix or YouTube TV where that channel qualifies for 4K streaming, which is really, really weird. If you're looking for R5C, I have one for sale, body, small ray, cage. Okay, good to know, PV Films. If I'm not mistaken, newly came out with the R7, had no 36. So I think you're right. I think that the new Canon cameras that are coming out don't have that 30-minute record limit. I think you're absolutely right. R5 plus IVIS plus IAF, R585L at 1.2, and I have handheld microwave like spinning shoots without gimbals. And I've seen some of those shots, and he is absolutely right. R5C will be easier to get. R3 has been on back order since launch. I feel like not everybody needs the R3, and here's like a spoiler for those of you that might be on the fence on whether you should get an R5C versus an R3. If you're not shooting fast-moving sports, you probably don't need the R3. And then second, for video and color, the R3 and the R5C, again, don't match, and the R3 is much more difficult to get the Canon colors that you would have come to expect and want than what you can get out of the R5C. Let's see. You think R3 is better? Cam, in your opinion? Still, nope. I wouldn't buy the R3. I didn't buy the R3 on purpose. If anything, I'm gonna hold out for the R1 if that ever happens, and then I'll make a decision there. R3 versus R5C. R5C for me, 10 out of 10 times. I have friends that own multiple bodies of the R3 and multiple bodies of the R5C, and for video work, 10 out of 10 times they choose the R5C. Cameron is selling his R5 for a second R5C. If anybody's interested, make sure you guys hit Cam up. Okay. And Lovable Natalie is buying another R5. And again, it's so difficult, right? Like, depending on what you do, if stills is like outweighs motion, the R5 is still a better camera. Like, IBIS, as much as I might not find it super valuable, that's only because 95, 97% of what I do has to do with motion, not stills. If I was 50-50 or even did more stills versus motion, I probably would feel different about IBIS. I was going to say the R5 seems ideal for me now, aside from the noisy shadows and CLog 3. So, your way around that, of course, is to light for what matters, if that makes any sense. So, a long time ago, way back when I was in school, I remember sitting through a class, and they basically said, if you don't light for, I'm going to use my phone. So let's say that we're in the scene. My phone's here. If you don't light for the phone to show up, then it doesn't matter in the scene. So if you always light for what matters, then your shadows are always protected. Does that make sense? Because the things that are going to then clip into or below the black point of your dynamic range or capture, whatever sits below that clipping point shouldn't matter to your scene. Because if it does matter, then take a moment to light for it. Even if it's something that is like kind of telling the story, but not the main part of the story, shine a very dim light and allow the silhouette to show up or the outline to show up or something to show up so that it could be part of the story. Because if you don't light for it, then it really isn't part of the story. I don't know if I'm making any sense. And maybe that needs to be its own video. I'm going to drink some water. But that's how you fix noisy shadows. And that's how I've always fixed noisy shadows. And if I'm doing run and gun, then I'm always choosing my primary area of focus that allows me to progress my story as the uncompromised piece of my image. Okay, you guys are talking to each other, good. R3 has IBIS, no 30-minute limit. Yeah, so the real problem with the R3, apparently, I haven't used it, so I'm just relaying what my friends have said to me, is the colors are difficult to work with compared to every other generation of Canon camera before it. And yeah, it is more expensive. And again, if you guys haven't checked out Cam's videos, be sure to check them out. And if you don't know where they're at, after this is done, I'll add the links in the description so you guys can check them out. Okay, you guys are still chatting. Thank you, Cameron. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. R5 is great for run and gun wedding video, but for commercial work, R5C is better. So, and that's the thing about, I guess that's the difference, right? So like, now that the playing field, now that the cost of entry has come down so much, and there are so many new DPs entering the market and ending up working on commercial projects, either for their local broadcast or commercials that are running on social media and so on. A cinema camera allows you all the creative freedoms that you would need to craft your story in a way and at a pace that you want it to, instead of a regular camera like a Sony a7 III, for example, that is going to be making a lot of decisions for you, and you're going to have to find a way to work around what the camera's doing to get your creative voice on screen. Which, by the way, again, I'm not interested in bashing Sony, but that's something that, and one reason why, as a content creator, not even as a working DP and director, as a content creator, I couldn't stick it out with Sony. I couldn't do it because I need to have my own voice instead of my voice being interpreted by what the camera wants to do. I'll leave that alone. And yes, Cam, that's true. I've seen his clips. You need to check him out if you haven't seen him, but his results are pretty fucking awesome. Price, yes. And you know, Tom, I think that this is what everybody has wanted, right? Everybody has wanted for Canon to effectively remove the leash and allow us to make our own decisions. And I feel like Canon is finally moving in that direction. Okay. Just sold my R5. Me too. Like, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I'm happy with the IQ of the R5 and more on R6 in most situations. I've never shot with the R6, so I don't really know. I don't know what the difference is between the R5 and the R6, to be honest. And I don't quite understand why Canon made two cameras so similar yet at different price points. I don't get it. I have the C70 as well, one of each, all different applications. So Theodore, here's something that I haven't said on social media. I haven't said out loud. I haven't even said it to my crew. So I used to have a C70. We actually had 3 of them here in the studio. We got rid of them. And the C70 is going to make a comeback. Yeah, I'm going to leave that alone for today because it's a different topic. But the C70 is a good camera. And the battery life makes it so that you don't have to rig it. So there we go. Andrew, always good to see you, man. Have you played around with the video of the GFX 100S? I really think that a hybrid camera, it gets overlooked heavy. So yes, Andrew, I have. And I think my biggest complaint, if any, first off, I love Fujifilm colors, okay? So my like my complaint on Fuji video features really is that they don't behave the same way that they do in stills, and I wish they did, so that I didn't have to make a switch or flip in my head as to how it is that I'm exposing. But damn, that camera's nice. It's really nice. And the files are so lightweight. Yeah, you're right. I think it does get overlooked. It's probably worth a lot more content, and I've been slacking because I've been working. Just, keeping it real. To give you guys an example, in the month of, this is still July? Yeah. In the month of July, this small production crew, we've produced more than 600, that's 600, social media, commercial videos, stories, and reels for other brands. And I think in the process, we also did 3 national commercial shoots. So this is why my YouTube channel doesn't get steady uploads. Only got the R5C for 8K60. I mean, that by itself is enough reason to buy the R5C. If Canon released the C500 with an RF mount and a DGO sensor that was full frame, that would become my A-cam immediately. Cool. Essentially, Canon has just enabled the high temp setting in the R5. Yep, very similar, sure. And I think it took them some time because they're just stubborn and they want other people to buy other bodies and other cameras, right? They want to segment their market, but I think they now have enough RF lenses that they need to move RF lenses. So now it's like, let's get our bodies in the hands of as many people as possible so they can keep buying our lenses. And even if that is what happened, I don't care because I'm benefiting from their decision making. C50 looks good. Check it out. Supposedly the red killer. C50. What is the C50? Are you talking about C500? I'm selling my R5 if anyone's interested. Good. I'm glad you all are chatting. This is why we have a community here. Okay. Thank you for stopping by, man. Really appreciate it. Take care. Have a good night. I'm sure you got to go to work tomorrow. Cool. You guys are talking. Kevin, thank you for always showing up, man. Really appreciate you. I do. R5C 4K60 downsample better quality than R5 4K60 pixel bin. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. Zach. I got an R5. I'd be willing to do work. Okay, cool. You guys are negotiating on your cameras. I think that's funny. Just got an R5C recently. Used it an all-day sit-down interview alongside C3 and MR3 with timecode sync, gimbal B-roll work, commercial stills, everything in between. It does it all. Love it. And that's really what Dustin just said in his comment is what I said, right? It's like this camera effectively is the Swiss Army knife on set. What do you want it to do? It's gonna get it done. I just really, I don't know. I think Canon really has knocked it out of the park. And I think I did a live stream where I said the R5C is Canon's GOAT, greatest of all time camera. Absolutely, I still believe it. R5C versus C500. How close are the pictures? So, I'm going to tell you something that is going to be controversial. People aren't going to like it, and maybe this is why effectively I've burned so many bridges with brands over the years. But the C500 Mark II, the image quality out of that camera in RAW or in the non-RAW version, so MXF-AVC, compared to the R5 RAW is inferior by at least one stop. Obviously, it makes sense, right? Both are full frame. The resolution difference, 6K to 8K, 8K is going to give you a better image, especially when you downscale it for 4K delivery. Almost no one that I know has been willing to admit what I just said. I've done it multiple times on live streams, but trust me when I say this, and I have files to prove it. The R5 has a superior image and noise to signal ratio over the C500 Mark II. What it doesn't have is everything else that the C500 Mark II has. Right? Proxy recording to the same media, built-in NDs, XLR audio with phantom power, the ability to add an expander that gives you 4 channels of XLR audio, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, very different cameras for different applications, but if we're only caring about the image quality itself, the R5 and the R5C can produce a better image than the C500 Mark II. And yeah, Mark, this is kind of what all of us, or a lot of us, have done. I sold my R5C for the R3 because of better AF and longer battery life. I also have the R5. And now, with the firmware update, you got 8K the way that you would want it. So I think you're in good shape. I have the R5, though I thought about going to the R5C, but when the C70 instead, love it. It's great. Have combo between the two. So Brandon, I'm not sure if you were here when I said this earlier, but I know that I had the C70s and then I got rid of them. C70 is going to make a comeback into the studio because the C70, that dual, not dual, what's it called? The DGO sensor, that is probably Canon's best sensor ever. If they could find a way to pair DGO with everything that the R5C is and the battery life of the regular cinema line, that would be a hell of a camera. I think they could steal the market share from basically every other brand. I'm also thinking of getting the R5C or the C70. Currently have the R5, looking for a little more video cam. R5C and C70 are both going to be workhorses. The R5C obviously is going to beat the C70 if you have to do stills. If you don't have to do stills, C70 is probably a better option. In my opinion, I should say that. R5 is much easier to use in running against situations. So I have the R5 and the R5C. Thanks for justifying keeping both. Yeah, seriously, I would totally, if I had to do it over again, I would have kept both. All right, let's see. Oh, that's what we had up earlier. Okay. I'm sure that the prices are going to continue to go up as demand goes up, but then also as, you know, it's difficult to get things and parts. Everybody's trying to capitalize on the price hikes, right? The R5 was normally priced at $4,800, then went down to $45, and now back up again. Yeah. And I think the firmware update by itself is probably, it makes it worth the up, you know, going back up in price. As much as I'm not a fan of paying more than I have to, I feel like those cameras are fairly priced. It's been such an easy and fun practical camera to roll with. Yeah, for sure. I just got the R5C 2 weeks ago and repurposed my R5 as a B cam. Awesome. And that'll become a very strong B cam. Yeah. And I wish, like, Had Canon released that firmware update before I sold my R5s, we would have kept them. That's just the honest truth. Hey, Frosty. I started putting on some work late September and early October. Sweet. Sweet. R5C is meant to be rigged out with battery. Yeah, I mean, the R5C, if you're using it for video, you don't have an option. You have to find a way to give it extra juice. Not even because of just the battery life, but because of the fact that without that extra juice, you cannot get 8K 60. So if you're planning on shooting 8K 60, you need the extra juice, which means you have to rig it out. Absolutely. New Canon C5, C50. So I don't know what that is. I have no idea what the C5 or C50 is. Potentially shoot 10K. Now so this is what I'm going to do tonight, I think. I'm going to try to figure out what the C5 and C50 is. V-Raptor XL on order. I'll put info soon. That's awesome. I was going to go with the V-Raptor XL, and I think I'm just going to go with the regular old V-Raptor. I mean, ultimately, if I'm going to use it in the studio, I'll rig it out. But I don't want to be stuck with a studio cam that I'm trying to use in the field if I want to. So I think that's what I'm going to do for now. And thank you for confirming what I said about the C500 Mark II. Got my R5C 2 weeks ago. 2 days later, put my R5 on sale. Yeah, auto white balance, not auto white balance, auto black balance is a game changer on that camera. Okay. I do think that on-screen exposure tools along the R5C much, absolutely, absolutely. I use an OC monitor, 7-inch monitor on top of my R5C. And the fact that every single menu item is available on my screen for me to go through and see as well as monitor, I think that that's actually really cool. What I wish, I know, like pie in the sky type wishing, the touch function of the quick menus on the C70 and the R5C on the actual LCD screen are really cool. I wish they didn't go away. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure if they do go away when I pull up the menu and I have a monitor plugged in. I'm going to have to double check that. You bet, Theodore. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think once Canon drops the C90 R5 RF C500 with DGO, it's if they do that, honestly, if Canon dropped that announcement, whatever camera, full frame, DGO sensor, built-in NDs, with XLR audio in a cinema body, I'm going to order 2 immediately. Facts. So there's schematics for the C5 and C50 floating around. Looks just like Komodo. And if I remember, Jared Line mentioned the relationship they have with Canon. So it makes sense. That's actually really, really interesting. Komodo, by the way, guys, is still a killer camera. Like, we love our Komodos. We have a lot of V-Raptors and XLs feel in the field. So, see, my max crew size, like the largest crew that normally we roll with, are 7 people. And I feel like with a full kit, like a Raptor XL, that might not be enough to, like, 3 people operating, 1 person directing. I don't know. I don't know that I have enough people on staff to go that route, at least today anyway. Literally has Komodo form factor. Yeah, I'm now totally curious about this camera. Keep playing well dinner and fam. Thank you. I appreciate it. I had projects. For tripod interview stuff with R5C, I run it off FX Lion Nano. That's what I use. Yeah, cool. I'm just going to say I agree. Komodo is fire. Fire, fire, fire. This is why we have multiple Komodos. DJI full frame may need cooling in a sensor that size. They already have a fan built in to like the C500 and the C300 Mark III, right? So C500 Mark II, C300 Mark III, they have fans built in. So can they just make a quieter fan? That would actually be kind of cool, even if it's a little bit bigger. I'd be fine with the fan being the size of the entire back of the body of the cinema camera. If it makes it quieter, I'm totally cool with it being that size, which is actually something that I like about Red, where the fans are the entire size of the top of the camera. It's kind of cool. We have a number of Komodos planning on using for live broadcast. Komodo for live broadcast is killer. The only real thing for those of you that are not Frosty, right? So everybody else, for those of you who are using Komodo for live streaming, if you're using an external microphone like I am, like you could see kind of the tip here of my microphone, if you're using an external microphone, the capture card that you're using has to have the ability to choose which channel of SDI audio it's piping into your streaming software or into your live broadcast software if you're pumping the audio straight into the camera. If you're not doing that, then it doesn't matter. You could sync it up in whatever software you're using. But if your audio is going straight into the camera, the capture card has to be able to discriminate between SDI audio channels. And there aren't that many that can do it. Komodo versus C70. That's actually a tough call. If you need autofocus, C70 all the way. If you don't care about autofocus, Komodo is a superior camera. If you're working by yourself, the C70 is a superior camera. So it really depends on your situation. For me, both would have a place in my studio, which is why the C70 is making a comeback. Ben used to have to replace my SDI port on Komodo. Komodo SDI port, no comment. So, and this is actually true, what James is saying here about the SDI port, it's not a Komodo thing. It's any camera that has 12G SDI. So because current can actually travel through the SDI port, because it's 12G instead of 3G, I think they flat out skipped 6G, you have to follow a procedure when using the SDI output out of Komodo. If you don't, you have the possibility of frying that output, which then makes having an external monitor impossible. But also, that is the exact same problem that Arri cameras have, right? So when you have 12G, you need to understand it, and then you need to make sure you don't short out your SDI. That's a tough one. C70 for just about everything. If you want badass handheld footage that looks gorgeous, super easy to work with the Komodo then. And, you know, here's something that not many people talk about, but everybody says, oh, Komodo's got a global shutter, right? Well, that is obviously true. But what that global shutter allows you to do is it allows you to get handheld images that just look so freaking awesome. Handheld on Komodo, because of the global shutter, is fire. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I got through all the comments. How awesome is that? That's something that happens all the time. We've been on here for an hour and 20 minutes. Thank you all for putting up with this. I think we're going to call it a day. This is Sunday, July 24th. Thank you all for participating. I really appreciate you all. Thanks for the 18 thumbs up that you all gave me. For whoever gave me the thumbs down, I got it, no problem. And we'll do this again soon. Next week, we will not do a live because I'm flying out on Friday for a 6-day project into Montana. So I won't be around, so I can't do this. But I will catch up with you guys on the next video, and hopefully we continue to build this community. I appreciate you all. I think I've said this numerous times. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate you all. So until next time, I'm Carlos. Take care, and I'll catch up with you guys on the next video. See ya.